I woke up while it was still dark this morning. Mommy was crying in the kitchen. I asked her if she was okay, and she told me to go back to bed. She tried to wipe away tears with her sweater sleeve, but her eyes were still red. She smiled at me, though it was empty and unconvincing. I hugged Teddy close and stood my ground.
Sweetie, it's before 4. Go back to bed, love.
Mommy, why are you crying?
I'm not crying. Let me walk you back to your bedroom.
She took me into her arms with a graceful sweep, and we went down the dark hallway together into my tiny, messy room. She laid me onto my sheets, her eyes wet and shimmering.
Close your eyes, baby.
She pulled my fleece comforter up to my shoulders and pushed my tousled hair out of my eyes.
Close your eyes and count backwards from 100.
That's what Mommy always told me when I couldn't sleep. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes I would get to 1 and then sit there in silence with my eyes open wide. Tonight, I didn't even try. I knew something was very wrong. The only time I'd ever seen Mommy cry was when she picked me up from school early after Daddy went to heaven, and that was a very bad time for us. I wonder sometimes why she was so sad when heaven is supposed to be a good place, but I think she maybe just felt alone. This time, I wouldn't let her be alone, so I snuck out of bed into the hall, leaving Teddy tucked under the covers behind me. I heard the murmuring of the television in the living room and saw my mother's silhouette against the fuzzy screen as I poked my head around the corner. She sat on the floor in front of the TV like a child, looking up at it, perplexed. From the screen came screams of terror and frantic talking. At first, I thought it was some kind of scary movie, but I recognized a man from the Channel 5 News. As I wondered what on earth could be happening, my mom, with what she calls her motherly senses, whipped her head around. I dove into the hall and ran as quietly as I could back to my room. I heard her laughing from the hall while I pretended to be asleep in bed. She flicked on the lights in my room, and I curled up in bed in an attempt to seem sleepy.
It's okay. I know you're awake, Ellie. Come on out. I'll make you some pancakes.
I sat up real quick and forgot all about pretending. Chocolate chip? She chuckled.
Chocolate chip and banana. Come on, you can help.
Mommy's cheeks were still rosy and her eyes were shiny like before, but her smile was genuine. I leapt up and raced into the kitchen, grabbing my daddy's too big apron off its hook and slinging it around my neck. My mom grabbed the mixing bowl off of the higher shelf, while I got the ingredients out of the fridge. Mommy and Daddy both loved to bake together. I never used to help when Daddy was still around, because it was always their thing that they did with just each other. But once Daddy was gone, I started wearing his apron and helping my mom pour in the flour and the chocolate chips and the sugar, and she started calling me her little sous chef. Her chocolate chip banana pancakes are my favorite. They remind me of when Daddy was around. Mommy turned on the stove and started heating the pan and soon shooed me out of the kitchen so she could clean up. I placed myself in front of the TV and turned it on. Immediately what popped up on the screen was the news, which I think is boring since I never understand what's going on. I tried to change the channel, but the same thing seemed to be on every station. It was a depiction of chaos, with crowds of people running into supermarkets and screaming and cursing. I just started reading in school, so it wasn't very easy for me to read the caption for the story. "Mommy," I called to her, "what's a meteor?" I heard a loud clatter in the kitchen, and my mom ran out and quickly shut off the TV.
Nothing, sweetie. There's nothing to watch today. Let's pull out your coloring books or something else this morning.
"But I want to watch Dora. Why isn't Dora on?"
Breakfast is almost ready.
She took my hand and led me to our cluttered table where we ate in silence. The pancakes tasted unusually bitter, and I almost didn't feel hungry in the first place. After breakfast, I asked my mom when we would leave for school today. She laughed nervously and told me I didn't have to go. "But Mommy, there's show and tell. I was going to bring my seashells Daddy found from the beach." My mom looked at me sadly.
There isn't any school today. Why don't we go get ice cream instead?
Why was she being so nice? I normally couldn't have sweets until after dinner, but I didn't want to make her upset, so I nodded and smiled.
All right, go get your coat and boots on.
Outside it was very quiet. Snow was still stuck on the ground, but the ice had melted on the roads and ran into the gutters like waterfalls. My mom took a weird back road, and I asked where we were going.
We have to go a different way today. There's bad traffic on the main roads.
In town, things were dead silent. Instead of parking and walking like we usually do, Mommy drove up right to the front of the ice cream shop to see if it was open. The place was dark, but my mom opened her door anyway.
Stay here,
she said, and approached the door cautiously. She pulled on it and it opened, to which she seemed strangely concerned. Mommy got back in the car and sat staring out the windshield for some time. Then she smiled really wide and got a crazy look in her eyes.
Ellie, why don't we go to the beach?
I looked at her for a while, confused. It's winter. Isn't it kind of cold?
Was the beach ever too cold for Daddy?
She was right. Daddy loved the beach. One time he went in the water when it was snowing, and he caught a bad cold, and Mommy yelled at him. But he winked at me, and we all ended up laughing about it because he was just so silly. I miss Daddy. It took 6 hours to get there. The traffic was so bad that our car barely moved at all, and there were so many wrecks. One car was on fire, and there were people helping, but no ambulance ever came. My mom drove straight up to the handicapped lot at the beach, even though I thought it wasn't allowed. She told me it didn't matter right now. She let me ride on her back all the way down to the ocean, and we laughed and breathed in the salty sea air, and it felt like we were home again. Not home at our apartment, but home with Daddy, before we moved inland because we couldn't afford our beach house. I remembered when I sat on the porch in Daddy's lap in the morning, looking out toward the coast as he sipped black coffee. I always asked for a taste, even though I knew it would be bitter and gross. He would tell me about his dream, and I would tell him about mine. He used to say that if I couldn't remember my dream, it meant that it slipped out of my ear at night and got blown away in the sea breeze. I always imagined my dream as a silvery mist swirling round in a spiraling wind. Mommy stood for a long time, just staring out at the frothing waves. I watched her expression, one of intense coolness. Suddenly, she broke out of her sort of trance, kicked off her shoes, and ran toward the water. I watched her dig her toes into the wet sand while the freezing water caressed her ankles. She did not flinch. The chilly breeze brought her messy hair to life, picking it up from her shoulders and dropping it down and twirling it gently. She looked beautiful, like how Daddy described how she looked when he first met her at a party in college. As the sun set over the water, my mom and I huddled together on the sand and watched the stars appear. The beach was empty and silent except for us and the waves and the faint sound of car horns and alarms in the distance. Once it was dark enough, I noticed a strange orange speck near the Little Dipper. I asked Mommy what it was. For a moment, she was silent. She opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated, and then chuckled.
It's a shooting star, sweetie.
She smiled sadly, tightening our embrace.
Make a wish.
I wish Daddy was here. He would love this. The orange speck in the sky looked a bit closer. When I looked up at my mom, she seemed to be crying quietly. I was concerned. Mommy, why are we here? Why was there no school? My mom breathed in shakily.
You know, Ellie, I think your wish may come true, baby.
My eyes widened. I turned to the orange orb in the sky and stared longingly. You mean we'll see Daddy again?
Yeah.
I felt comfortable in my mother's arms, and I even felt warm in the bitter cold. I'm going to see Daddy. My mom's eyes seemed peaceful and shiny, and her face was soft and beautiful in the light of the stars. I felt a sudden wave of fatigue sweep over me, and I nestled into my mother's lap. I love you, Mommy.
I love you too, Ellie.